This is Wildcat Country.
It's only right. The ball's in his hands. A milestone victory for Arizona. Simon says championship.
All the inside scoop on U of A athletics.
It's up for the end zone. Arizona has scored the touchdown. Wildcats win.
Let's go to work, brother.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country, powered by Backcourt Marketing. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and what a glorious week. I mean, it's signing day, which this podcast we're recording before signing day. We're going to talk about that in the third segment. But Shane, what everybody is talking about, if you're a Wildcat fan, is what happened on Saturday in Champaign, Illinois. Arizona goes into Illinois, which is a pretty good team. I know they're unranked, but they're pretty good, and overcame a 19-0 Illini run in the first half and pulled off a ridiculous victory. Just unbelievable. Now, just before you get talking here, want to preview the show. Bruce Pascoe, the awesome beat writer for the Arizona Daily Star, in the next segment. Remember, he picked Arizona 6th in the Pac-12 in his preseason poll. You know I will ask about that right away. But Shane, I'm going to ask you right away, how about them Wildcats?
Let me back up for a second, Eric. You and I had a quick text chat the other day about maybe it's not a good idea to have verbal commits on our show.
Yes.
Anytime soon. We call it, I don't want to call this, but it does seem to be the Wildcat Country curse. We've had a number of guys, we won't mention who, but just several who decommitted after we talked to them. I think hopefully it wasn't us who turned them off the program. Anyway, so bottom line, if we're going to have commits on, they have to sign their LOI first. I think that's the new rule we have.
Or be like locked in, like where there's no, like Noah Fafita, there was no.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Some people say they're 110% in and then they're 110% out. So who knows? Anyway,
he's in. Anyways, all right. How about them Wildcats? How about the men's basketball team and the women's team, by the way, as well? The only two undefeated programs, and the only school that has both undefeated programs at this point, the men and the women. Hopefully that'll be true the next time we talk as well. What I took away from this, Eric, is that this team can get punched in the mouth and they'll punch right back. And I'd love to see it. I think this team has taken on the personality of its coach, which, Tommy Lloyd comes across as kind of like an aw shucks kind of nice guy. And I'm sure he is, but he's also got this edge to him. And we saw that in the post-game press conference after the Wyoming game, where he's like, other than playing at McHale, going and kicking someone's ass on the road is the best feeling. And I didn't kick Illinois' ass. It could have gone either way. It came down to the last couple of minutes, but they made enough plays. And what I love is that it doesn't necessarily take a big offensive play to get this team going. It could take a great defensive play, like Christian Coloco's swat that led to some transition points for Arizona. It was early in the second half where I think they built a 7-point lead that way. And Illinois came back. But you think about all the adversity they faced before that game. And obviously we'll talk to Bruce Pascoe, who I know was out there as well, about all the travel horrors out there and having to Uber, I guess, take lifts. TJ Benson clarified it was Lyft, not Uber, that got them out to Champaign, Illinois for the game from Indianapolis. So having to deal with that, of course, Kim Aiken still being out, a hostile crowd, getting smacked in the mouth, 19-0 run, and coming back and doing what they needed to do to win a close game. I was very impressed. It's another game in the long list of really impressive performances, whether they're blowouts or whether they're tight victories like this one or the one against Wichita State, that has me believing. I'm finally at the point now where I definitely could see this team making a Final Four run. We got a long way to go. A lot of hurdles to clear, not the least of which is still, COVID could strike at any time. But certainly I think that this team has fully established itself now as one of the top contenders in college basketball and definitely worthy of a top 10 ranking. It's amazing because we had talked about, I had said personally, the Wildcats will be in the top 25 in November, December. They'll definitely be in the top 25. But I don't think either Shane or I thought they would be in the top 10 at any point this year. And now I guess we might as well just start buy or sell as we've done our weekly tradition. Let's start number one. I mean, I know the Wildcats are number 8, but I'm thinking that the Wildcats number 8 ranking is much too low. Do you buy or sell that statement?
Much too low, I would sell. I predicted them to be 6 or 7. And look, if Arizona was ranked in the top 10 to begin the season, they'd probably be number 1 or 2 right now. So you have to claw your way in.
But that's why that's a bunch of the preseason ranking is a bunch of garbage.
Yeah, I agree. Well, here's my thing, Eric, is yes, it's great to be ranked high. It's great to be able to say you're number 1 or in the top 5 or top 10.
It doesn't matter. Tangibly.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't. It doesn't in terms of where the team is seated in the NCAA tournament, Eric, which is the only thing that matters about the regular season is getting to the tournament and then winning 6 games in a row once you get there. So yes, I would love to see them be more respected nationally, but look, if they keep winning, it'll come. They beat Tennessee. We talked about how they're going to do in those 4 games against Illinois, Tennessee, USC, UCLA. They're 1-0. If they get to 4-0, they will be in the top 5. They may even be number 1. We've had a different number 1 team 4 weeks in a row. So there's definitely a chance that Arizona could get there.
But how many teams, just off the top of your head, have a better resume to this point than Arizona? I mean, right now, ESPN's BPI, which I don't know all their metrics, has Arizona's strength of victory as number 1 in the country.
And number 7 overall in BPI, number 7 in Ken Palm, number 5 in Sager, and 1 in net. Number 1 in net. They were number 1 in net before they played Illinois. So, yeah, I think all those metrics would warrant them being ranked a little bit higher, probably closer to 5 or so.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I am buying that it's much too low.
Well, I think much. I guess your definition of much in mine is maybe a little different. Like, is it a little low? Yeah, I thought they should have been 6 or 7, maybe 5.
I think there's a big difference between 5 and 8.
Okay, that's fair.
And that's what. So that's where I said it. But I understand your point of view as well. All right, number 2. This win over Illinois that we saw on Saturday is the program's most significant victory since the Pac-12 championship game in 2018, where the Wildcats beat USC.
It's up there, but I would sell it. I would say the Michigan game was more significant because I think that is the game, Eric, that signified that Arizona men's basketball is back. At the time, I know Michigan's out of the top 25 now, but they were number 4 at the time.
Yep.
Most people didn't give Arizona. I didn't give Arizona much of a chance to win that game, and they didn't just beat Michigan. They destroyed them. It was not a contest, and Michigan's got its own problems. So you could say, well, maybe Michigan wasn't that good, and it certainly seems like that's the case. But I think that's the game that got Arizona back to a national contender. It's like, oh, remember Arizona Wildcats? They're still a good basketball team, and here they are. And it was the most positive piece of news, I would say, that came out of that program for a long time, because there's a lot of off-court stuff, some failures on the court as well. I mean, after the FBI probe came out, Arizona got routed by 13 seed Buffalo in the NCAA tournament. They underachieved, even though they didn't get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. They definitely didn't look like a championship contender in the year that Nico Mannion and Zeke Naji were there. So I would say I would sell it. I think it's close.
Yeah,
but I would put the Michigan, as far as like a turning point for the program, as like a national announcement that we're back, I would put the Michigan game slightly ahead of that.
All right, you sold me on that one. I was going to go with Illinois. I just think the enthusiasm, I think people looked at the Michigan win in a way as, oh, maybe that's kind of a fluke. Maybe Michigan isn't that good. And then they look at this Illinois game as a true road game. Wildcats had a lot of adversity in the first half after building an early lead, give up that 19-0 run. And that's why I kind of feel like, in a way, this is a turning point. Now people are actually are willing to go put on masks to go sit in McHale Center and watch games.
That's a fair point.
I mean, that place needs to be sold out on Wednesday night and Saturday. There's no, for every game. How do you not go and support this team? If Shane and I lived in Tucson, we'd be there, for every game. He and I will go to games, I'm sure, separately throughout the season. I will say, Eric, there is a difference between being in the top 25 and being in the top 10 in terms of national recognition. Being in that top 10, like a lot of times you'll see like the AP story or the ESPN story will only mention the teams in the top 10 in the actual text of the story. So Arizona's in that text now, and I think that does matter. Let's talk about the game itself. Number 3 in buy or sell. The most impressive aspect of the Wildcats' win on Saturday was fighting back from that 18-0 run where, I think it was like 24-18. The next thing you know, it's 37-24. And you're like, what happened? To me, it was the most impressive aspect of it. So I'm buying that. Are you?
Easiest one for me. Yeah, I'll buy that one, Eric, for sure. Like I mentioned toward the beginning of the show, way back 5 minutes ago, they got hit in the mouth, and a lot of teams won't come back from that. You have 15,000 fans screaming at you, throwing insults, and they have, the big guy Coburn was Arizona did a decent job of neutralizing him, but they could have gotten pushed around by a Big Ten team. And we didn't mention the officiating. I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know if I'd blame the officials if they'd lost, but I certainly would have brought it up. I guess I brought it up since they won too. Mm-hmm. So a lot of adversity. They overcame a lot of adversity, and I think the 19-0 run was really the climax of that. and they battled back. They cut it to 4 at halftime, and then they surged out to a lead in the second half. And even after that, Illinois took the lead back a couple times. They led by a point, I think, with a couple minutes left, and Arizona made enough plays. There's a really great pass from, I want to say it's from Krisa to Tubelis for a layup that ended Illinois' run and put Arizona back on top. And they hit enough free throws. They still need to improve their free throw shooting a little bit. They hit enough free throws down the stretch and made enough clutch shots made enough defensive plays to seal the deal.
Well, you led right into number 4 here. The most improved player on Arizona's roster isn't Christian Coloco, who I would have said, as of a few days ago or a few weeks ago, it's Kirk Krisa, your favorite player on the roster. Would you agree, buy or sell? Kirk Krisa, the most improved player on this roster.
I'd like to buy it because he is my favorite player, and I've been singing his praises since the beginning of last season.
Yes, you have.
I'll sell it just because we didn't see a lot of Kirk Krisa last season. Okay. So it's hard to say if he had been able to play a full season, if he had been eligible for a full season, maybe he'd be even further along now than he was. We saw a full season of Christian Coloco, and he was a very serviceable backup center, big guy who can get a few points and a few rebounds a game. This is a completely different guy we're seeing this year. So I would say, and I think also with Christian Coloco, a lot of times, like I mentioned earlier as well, it's like a big dunk or a big 3-point shot that can end the rally or get a team back in it. With him, it's a big block, a big swat that can really energize this team. And he makes not only doesn't have a lot of blocks, but he has a lot of dramatic ones too, like very emphatic ones that gets the team going and gets the crowd going when they're playing at home. So as much as I'd love to say Krisa for this one, and I love watching him, I would hate him if he was on any other team because I just think he was like a headband wearing punk. And maybe he is, but I love the guy because he plays for my Wildcats. But as far as most improved, I've got to go with Christian Coloco.
I got to disagree with you here. I'm buying this notion, and I will say it because Arizona is going to go as far as Kirk Krisa takes them. When you look at the strong Arizona teams in the past, it's all about a great point guard. And we were kind of afraid because, losing James Akinjo, who was that alpha point guard, he goes to Baylor, the defending national champs.
Number one Baylor. Yeah.
Number one Baylor. And you're like, well, Kirk Krisa is kind of an off the ball guard. Like, can he run the point? And he's done a fantastic job. And Arizona doesn't win that game last Saturday, if not for his exploits. I think he had 17 points and really hit some clutch shots in the second half.
You could certainly argue he was the MVP of that game. I know Ben Mathurin went off again, obviously.
But this was a guy shooting that didn't make that didn't make any shot outside of a 3-pointer last year in 8 games.
I understand. I'm just saying, well, it was 8 games. If we had seen those numbers all season, I might be inclined to agree with you. But we've got to. It comes down to me, Eric, just to answer your question straight on. We saw a full season of Christian Coloco. We didn't get that with Kirk Krisa. That's why I'm going to stick with Coloco.
You brought up something very interesting. Obviously we've seen in professional sports that the COVID surge is happening again. So when I wrote this question earlier today, I didn't really think about that. Number 5 in buy or sell, Arizona will lose 4 or more games in conference. You buying or selling that?
Remind me, how many games are they playing in the conference?
Well, they have 19 more and they've played 1.
Right. So they got 20.
Washington game. They have 20 games in conference.
Yeah, I think back to the Lute Olson era when they had so many good teams and they always lost at least one game. I think 17-1 was their best, and that was an 18-game schedule.
Yep.
It's going to be difficult. I think it's interesting because this is a different Pac-12 than we're used to, because instead of having like kind of mediocrity throughout and maybe 5 or 6 borderline NCAA tournament teams, we have, I would say at this point, 3 bona fide Final Four contenders and 9 NIT at best teams. So it looks a little different. I would, buy Arizona will lose 4 more games. I will reluctantly buy it. And I'm sure people are going to call me a hater or whatever for it, but 16-4 in the conference, if it's 4 or more, 16-4 is still pretty good. You remember they got to go at UCLA and at USC. If they split those, then there might be 3 more losses somewhere down the line. They're probably going to experience an upset or 2, even though it's unfathomable right now because they're undefeated and everyone's on cloud 9. But they're probably going to lose a couple games. And like you mentioned, COVID is the wild card. If they have to forfeit a game or 2, then I think that factors in as well.
All right. So in the great Sean Miller teams, they would go seasons without losing a game at home. Do you see the Wildcats losing a home game at McHale Center, knowing that UCLA and USC are coming to play there at some point?
Probably. Yeah, probably to one of those teams. Yeah. I think.
UCLA is really good. Yeah. UCLA is really good.
Yeah, let's not discount them. You could certainly make an argument that Arizona is the best team in the conference right now, but they play. I remember it was a few years ago when the Larry Markkinen year and Lonzo Ball at UCLA, They played UCLA 3 times. They beat them in Pasadena. They lost to them in Tucson. Then they beat them in the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas. So that was the
Sean Miller timeout game. Remember?
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
with
right.
Alford. Yeah.
Poised to moving forward. Now I did enjoy that.
That was my favorite Sean Millerism during his tenure at Arizona.
It was good. But my point is that the only one of those 3 games that Arizona lost was in Tucson. So you never know. So if you're asking, will they go undefeated? Probably not. There's probably a loss in there.
All right, number 6. It is finally okay, Shane, for fans to dream about Arizona's chances in March. It's okay. We're good to do this now. 9-0, we're good.
It's okay, but I don't know if I could officially endorse it just because something I'm talking more just from as a personal cynical fan. Okay, something always seems to come up. Whenever something seems really good, and not just Arizona Wildcats, but I'm an Arizona sports fan aside from ASU. Cardinals, Suns, Coyotes, D-backs. And by the way, you need to stop going to football games because my team always loses in them. The
Cardinals. Come on now. Come on.
Well, for whatever reason, the Cardinals are much better on the road. But anyway, this is not the Cardinals podcast. So yeah, it is. I'm telling you, I'm guarding my heart closely because number one, the last few years we've seen happen. We've had so many close calls over the years in terms of getting to the Final Four, and then there's still just so much. We're still in the calendar year 2021, Eric. There's still so much that can happen.
Agreed. Yeah,
many ups and downs, possible injuries. You got the COVID wild card. And the possibility of not being able to play in the tournament, which I think it sounds like they should be eligible at least for the season to play in the tournament. We'll talk more about that with Bruce Pascoe coming up. But yes, I would just say tread carefully.
Let me put it this way, Shane. There is no way, in my opinion, and I hope I'm not jinxing here. There's no way, in my opinion, the NCAA is going to prohibit Arizona, one of the best teams in the country, now that they've proven to be one of the best teams in the country, from playing in the NCAA tournament. Just kind of.
They did it with Louisville a few years ago. Louisville was a top 15 team, and they late in the season they made them ineligible.
I'd have to go back and think about that, but based on the penalty that Auburn got last week, I'm not as concerned as I once was. All right, my bonus question that I have not shown you beforehand. This is not a buy or sell. This is about Arizona basketball. The Wildcats I'm going to put the over under at 2.5 players on the roster who will be future first round picks in the NBA draft. You taking the over 2.5 or the under 2.5?
Ooh. You know why I don't like these? Because you don't give me time to prepare, Eric. And I have a sneaking suspicion that's the entire point of these.
That is correct.
These questions.
Yes.
Gosh, so I have to think on the fly. Who's going to be?
All right, so Matherin's going to go in the lottery. Let's look at that one. Ben Matherin's going in the lottery.
I think he'll be at least a first round pick.
Well, I've seen him as high as number 6 in a mock draft.
Have you really? Okay.
Yeah. Tubelis, I've seen anywhere in the first, or I've actually seen him in the second in a couple. So that one is on the fence. I think, I think Koloko is a first round pick, and I have a buddy who's a big basketball guy that doesn't think he'll even be drafted. So, Kirk Kriisa probably not. Dalen Terry is another guy that I think could be a first round pick.
I'll sell it just because I think Matherin is, but I think you kind of have to get lucky to have 2 other guys. If you had it at 1.5, I'd probably buy. At 2.5, I'm going to sell for now.
I'm taking Dalen Terry as an eventual first round pick. I just think he's a glue guy. He's the, as I say about Sam Thomas and on the women's basketball team, Dalen Terry on the men's team, he stays 4 years. That guy's going to be a first round pick. And I think Koloko, if he stays and puts on some more weight and refines that offensive game, I think he is a first round pick, in addition to Matherin, who I think goes in the lottery this year, and Tubelis, who I think has a pretty good shot. Maybe not this year, but maybe in 2023. All right, coming up next, let's talk to Bruce Pascoe, find out if he would like to revise that preseason number 6 in the Pac-12 prediction. Here on Wildcat Country, powered by Backcourt Marketing. Shane, our guest this week is one of the smartest basketball men that we've talked to yet on the podcast, Bruce Pascoe, the ace basketball reporter for the Arizona Daily Star. See,
he talks up everyone, but I actually happen to agree with him.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Got to agree with me on this one. All right, Bruce, glad to have you back on the podcast. Got to ask you, first of all, the last time we had you on about 6 weeks ago or so, we had discussed your vote for the Pac-12, preseason rankings, and you had Arizona at 6th. If you could revise that today, where would you put the Wildcats in the Pac-12 pecking order?
Probably second, maybe third, but probably second. I still would go with UCLA just because they've got, they're just so veteran. But and I think, as good as Arizona's playing, there's just something to be said for that experience level in conference play. But I could be wrong. Obviously, I was already kind of wrong. So what do I know? I'm just saying. I mean, they've kind of been. As good as they've hit their ceiling that I think anybody would have expected. I don't think any of us expected them to be as good as they've been playing, but except them, of course.
Yeah. Well, and it's easy for us to say, what were you thinking? But I think I would have put them right about where you had as well. So I think we even talked about that on the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, they were picked fourth overall. I think they were picked in a tie to finish with Oregon State for a tie for fourth, and Oregon State's been really struggling, but yeah, it's just, preseason is just a guess. It's always hard to say, especially when you have as many questions as Arizona had coming in.
Yeah. Well, Eric Sky, Wayne Tinkle definitely struggling in Corvallis. Tell us about your travel adventures out to Champaign, Illinois, Bruce. I know the Wildcats, we heard about them and their ride share service. I think it was Lyft, and not Uber, but Lyft that they took out there. Yeah, both.
They had some of both. Yeah.
Okay, a little from column A, a little from column B. What was your experience like?
Well, mine was okay. I mean, compared to them, it was nothing. I mean, and compared to the, tragic, tornadoes that hit other parts of Illinois and Kentucky, where people died, it was, nothing. I actually flew into O'Hare in Chicago and was just driving south, and it was okay in Chicago. And then the further south I got, it was just sheeting rain, and I was getting kind of hungry. So I just pulled over and got something to eat. And while I was sitting there in my car eating, my phone goes off and says tornado warning or whatever,
welcome to the Midwest,
stay off the roads or whatever. Yeah. So I went into this 24-hour Mihir market or whatever they call it over there and asked the guy if I could do some work in their little food court, which was closed. And he's like, sure, go ahead. So I stayed there for like an hour and a half, and I updated my story on their delays while I was doing my own delay. But and eventually did kind of let up, and it was pretty easy driving the rest of the way. Once I got there, I just didn't get to Champaign till like midnight, and which the traveling party didn't get there till midnight either, coming from Indianapolis. But the players got in about 10 with those Uber and Lyft rides, and talking to several of them since then, they had a much tougher time, because even not only did they get stuck in Indy, but they, the ride was pretty hairy from what I understand. They were I think they got as many SUVs as they could. Most of them were, but even then, I think Tommy Lloyd told us today that their driver had both hands on the wheel the entire time. It was just like, like bear down kind of thing, because it was raining so hard. And, and then Jack Murphy, the associate head coach, told me once they got to Champaign, all the streets were flooded. They had to go through some underpasses, and they looked at their driver and they were like, hey, Paul, you got to gun it or we're not going to make it through this thing. And then the guy just whizzed them through, and they made it. But it was crazy. I think the only people who weren't fazed by it were the players, which is exactly what as a coach, what you want. The players didn't seem to mind it. Christian Coloco said today, he just sat in the back. He was sat in his car, was watching the Iowa-Illinois game on replay on his computer, sitting in the big SUV, had no idea, and so that's the thing. They got to bed at a reasonable time and woke up and beat Illinois. So it was a good thing as it turned out for them.
Let's talk about that game, because I know you as a beat writer, Bruce, I'm sure you're always thinking about what the overall theme of your post-game story is going to be. And when Illinois went on that 19-0 run in the first half and 15,000 Illini fans are going crazy, were you already starting to think about having to put together about a story about Arizona's first loss of the season? Or did you think that based on what you've seen from this team to this point, they definitely had the potential to rally like they did?
Yeah, no, well, I thought they could. But I was thinking all in. I thought going in, it was going to be tough. So I figured it could be their first loss of the season, and that wouldn't have been a surprise, that way. But, it was interesting the way it was so big of runs. And then down the stretch, all of a sudden, the last 10 minutes, it basically turned into like a one position game, and there was nobody was doing a run. It was just, tit for tat kind of deal. And so it really made for a great game in that segment. And it's funny how it went. In fact, I mentioned the 19-0 run to Tommy Lloyd, and he said, really, was it 19-0? He said, that was bad coaching. They should have called more timeouts or something like that. Yeah. He said, I don't think he realized how things were going, but it was just such a crazy environment there. Really easy to lose composure, and you got to credit Arizona for kind of, plugging through that and making runs of their own and kind of silencing the crowd. And, it was really quite amazing the way that happened.
Bruce, I asked Shane in the first segment, because we disagree on this one. Who is the most improved player from last season to this season on Arizona's roster?
Well, I think it's still probably Christian Coloco. I think he struggled a little bit offensively the last few games. You're laughing, but
I said Coloco. He thinks it's Kriisa. I just thought it was too small sample size.
Yeah, but Kriisa's kind of got an asterisk. You could argue that. That's a good argument. I mean, but I think you got to put an asterisk by him because he only played 8 games, and the 8 games he played, James Akinjo was the point guard, and James Akinjo was a point guard who played 36 minutes a game and had the ball in his hand for probably 35 of those 6 minutes. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it was a completely different role that he had. However, you did see some signs in him that he had this swagger and toughness about him, because he came out right away. And, the first games he was eligible, they were at Utah and Colorado, 2 of the tougher places to play. He didn't shoot well at Utah, but he came out and played pretty well defensively. And then I remember Colorado, I always tell the story, but one of the things he did among others in that game was he, on a fast break that Colorado had, McKinley Wright's going for a layup. He jumped in front of him and took a charge. I mean, I don't even know how I got there, and just having the guts to do that and get clobbered and pick up a foul by one of the most veteran respected guards in the league. That really says something. And so I knew, hey, this guy's got potential to really be something. And then this year you're seeing that, his leadership and toughness and swagger, and, not always a great shooter, but sometimes he can be. And, but regardless of that, just brings him a lot. So you could argue that, but I think Coloco just, because of the bigger role he's in and the fact that he had a real off season, unlike the 2020 off season, where more so than most guys, he was really impacted by COVID. He was there in LA and all the gyms were closed. He had nowhere to go. He was talking about how, I think we had a Zoom with him in July that summer, and he was saying, well, I have an exercise band here. I can do a little bit with that or something. It was like, so it was almost like he lost that, because you usually see the big jump. The biggest jump is usually, it's kind of a cliche, but it's true. Biggest jumps usually between your freshman and your sophomore year, because you know what it's been like, you know what you need to do, and you get better over that summer. He didn't really have that, because of COVID. And then, so I think his big jump was between his sophomore and junior year. And then on top of it, obviously Tommy Lloyd's system seems to work well for him, and that's bringing out even more. So that's kind of my vote, but I think Kriisa is definitely interesting what he's doing. No question.
I mean, it's an interesting debate, and so Shane gets the point for that one. So Bruce, when you look at this team, I know this is kind of a difficult question to ask. I know we're only 9 games in, but when you think about previous U of A teams, which one would you most compare this team to over the last, let's say, 30 years that stands out to you?
Wow. I mean, I wasn't around back then, but I mean, I've heard stories about like the Stoudemire Reeves teams, 93, 94, maybe those teams. I think you could maybe make a comparison to 98, the defending champs, and maybe maybe even that 03 team that got to the Elite Eight and lost to Kansas, I think it was.
Yep.
They were pretty up tempo as well. But as far as comparing some of the guys, you could go down the line. It's almost kind of with the exception of Coloco, who's bigger than anybody Arizona had for the championship team and the 98 team. You could look at Kriisa a little bit like Miles Simon, the way he carries himself, and Benedict Mathurin, appears to be very similar to the way Michael Dickerson was back then. So, there's some comparisons there too. But as far as the whole picture, I don't know. Maybe you'd have to go back further to those Reeves Stoudemire teams, and I don't know. Maybe you guys could speak to that as well. I don't know.
The leap forward that this team has made from last year, Bruce, in your opinion, is it more about the players, or is it more about Tommy Lloyd and this coaching staff?
Well, I mean, the players of this, the players are, a lot of them are the same. I mean, their top producers are the same players. And they, I always think that I think the system is definitely helping, but I think that, you have to look at last year and you kind of got to give Miller a little bit of credit, because not only did he recruit all those guys, but they were pretty good last year. It's just that nobody paid any attention to them because they had declared they weren't going to the postseason, and they were young and they were true freshmen last year. And, considering all that, they were pretty good. And I think then they had the big freshman and sophomore year jump, and converting to a system with Tommy Lloyd, that seems to benefit most of them. That's probably the biggest thing right there. And then I think, maybe arguably you could argue possibly, and I think a lot of these guys, seem to be reasonably happy last year, but they seem to be happier this year. And I think Tommy Lloyd's made no secret. He's just a very easygoing, upbeat guy. He has a different way of disciplining guys around him, and that seems to have kind of brought out more of them too. For example, one thing that really struck me in that Illinois game was Dalen Terry was really struggling. He picked up 2 early fouls, and then he wasn't shooting well. He was doing great things defensively. At one point, he put up a 3-point shot. There was a bad shot, kind of rushed it, and he looked over the bench, and I had a good view of it from where I was sitting, and he had this panicked, frustrated, and partially guilty look to his eyes, and he looked at Tommy Lloyd like, what should I do or whatever. And Lloyd just kind of motioned out to him like, don't worry about it, take a better shot, that you don't need to take that shot. Instead of like, a lot of coaches might yank him out of the game, might not play him again or whatever. And whereas on the other hand, last week, I think Tommy Lloyd told the story, there was a practice during the summer where Dalen Terry previously had done a lot of problems with jump stopping, a lot of turnovers in a practice or scrimmage they had or whatever. Lloyd didn't say anything to him then, didn't yank him right away, didn't scream at him, and didn't say anything. Then the next day, Dalen shows up for practice, and Tommy Lloyd goes and says, "Dalen, you can't practice today." And he looked at him like he was crazy. He said, you turned the ball over 12 times. You're going to have to go to the sideline and work on that. And so it was just a different way of disciplining him. And, and now you look at Dalen Terry's the number 2 assist turnover ratio guy in the country right now. So you wonder if that had something to do with it, or, he's certainly a talented, creative player. But maybe in his case, maybe that form of instruction works better for him. It's
like the right coach inheriting the right up and coming team. Maybe.
Yeah. That's what it seems to be. I think Miller got some talented guys. He got those guys out of desperation. He got Dalen Terry because he's from Phoenix, and there was a number of reasons behind the scenes for that. And then he got the bulk of that class overseas and recruiting over Zoom, and they hadn't even seen these guys except on video. It was just like, they were just getting the guys that were the highest rated, and they got to learn a little bit, but it was, recruiting fast over Zoom. Nobody knew what exactly they were going to get. And they turned out to be pretty good. And then you're right. And then it just so happens that they fell into this guy whose forte is recruiting and coaching international players. And, it really was a fortunate turn of events for Arizona. And I'm sure that in the back of the minds of the administrators who made the hire, they were probably thinking this could happen. Hey, if we get this guy, Tommy Lloyd, and we can keep these guys from leaving, look what could happen. And that's exactly what's happening.
Let me ask you about Kim Aiken, who was part of Arizona's 9-man rotation, one of their better outside shooters early in the season. He's missed Arizona's last 2 games for undisclosed personal reasons. What do we know about his situation, if anything, in terms of when he might be back? And in your opinion, how could an extended absence impact the team?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. We don't know. They're not saying much. I asked Tommy again today, and he said he didn't know, and he said he hopes he gets back soon, and it's a day-to-day deal. All I know is that they've been hinting it's sort of out of their control, and but it's weird when you say personal. It doesn't really narrow anything out except injury. It doesn't. It could be academics? Could it be something he did off the court? Could it be, who knows? I mean, the last couple of times they've used personal reasons, they've been very serious things that have happened that have come out. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the case here. I don't know, but it doesn't help that they're not categorizing it at all. So, we just don't know what the deal is. And, if there's some other kind of thing going on, or if it's a family matter, or in which case, if it's a family matter or somebody having a health issue, usually they say that, and they're not. So I don't know. It could be that Kim just said, hey, I don't want to talk about it, and they had to respect that because of student privacy, and that may be all it is. So, but we don't know. But anyway, to answer your other question, it definitely impacts him. In fact, I think that if he was there Saturday in Illinois, I don't think Illinois hit 16 3-pointers. I can pretty much guarantee you that. I think he's kind of been an unsung hero defensively off the bench for this team, and then he's hit the open threes himself when he is open. So, and he gives you that extra depth that they didn't have a lot of depth. They didn't use a lot of depth on Saturday, and that's going to be fine for the most part. But there's going to be a lot of games with foul troubles or injuries where they're going to need him, and even if they don't have those problems, I think it definitely helps rotating him in, as well. And yeah, I mean they there might have not been a 19-0 run. It's very easy to say maybe Aiken shuts down one or two of those shots during that run, and it goes a different direction, or at least it's mitigated to some extent.
Bruce, I don't mean to be recycling questions. You obviously weren't with Shane and I for the first segment, but I got to ask you this one when it comes to the excitement of fans. Is it time now that fans can really start dreaming of exotic expectations, let's say, in March? And maybe that's not the right term, but I mean, just like over the top expectations, are they more realistic now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that sometimes in college basketball, you just got to grab it when it's there. And, you can't say, oh, they're too young. They're not that young. And, sometimes things happen a little ahead of schedule. Years ago, you saw that with the 97 team, and it wasn't supposed to happen that year, and it did. And then it was supposed to happen the next year, and it didn't. So, that's definitely possible. I mean, it's coming together. I think that the one thing, as I mentioned, comparing them to like UCLA, they don't have that much experience. They don't have that much depth, especially if they do lose a guy like Aiken or whatever down the road. Those two things, they haven't had a lot of adversity as far as they haven't really had any as far as injuries. I mean, they had Koloko lost, 12 minutes when he sprained his ankle against Sac State. And then they missed Aiken for the last two games. That's literally been it. No suspensions, no injuries, not any real serious foul trouble, a little bit here and there with a couple of guys. But, so some of that stuff's going to hit. But I do think that, they definitely have the elements and the multiple weapons and defense that could carry them. They could make a pretty good run. I wouldn't have said that a month ago, but it does look like that.
And boy, how exciting is it? I mean, nobody would have thought that. We had been talking, all right, if they make the top 25, we'll be happy. If they maybe get to the Sweet 16. So the next obvious question is, all right, well, there was a postseason opt-out last year because of a potential ban. And then you see what happened to Auburn last week, where they kind of got a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
Does that make you feel more optimistic that, hey, maybe the postseason bans are done for Arizona? I know not necessarily related, but similar sanctions, right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it is similar. It's very similar in that the Chuck Person charge was the same as Book Richardson. In fact, Chuck actually, allegedly took 4 times more than Book did. So you could look at it that way. But the difference, though, is that Arizona has, 3 other level 1 charges that weren't related to the FBI thing. Well, 2 certainly, and one is the academic issues that Richardson and Phelps were allegedly doing, and then another one was Phelps trying to cover up a loan. And those didn't have anything to do with the FBI thing. So it is a little more against Arizona. So I don't know. And the other X factor is we don't know because it's a different process. Auburn went through the standard process and they appeared to work with the NCAA. And we all know that cooperating with the NCAA doesn't necessarily help you, but they did. And they went through the standard process and they got it. They accepted their 1-year ban that they had already done last year. But Arizona went another route to this new independent route, and that they still haven't finished any of their cases. They got 6 of them in there. They're still brewing around. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows if they're going to be easier, harsher, the same. How are they going to handle them versus the standard track? And we just don't know. I do know that they came back after a year of investigating. They basically came back with the same 5 allegations. So nothing there changed. So if they process that as an aggravated level 1 case, which it would appear those charges add up to, it still could be 2 to 5 years. And we just don't know though, but it's a new case, and maybe because they're independent, maybe they take a bigger picture look at it and say, hey, Arizona's made all these changes. It's all good. We'll just take some scholarships away or whatever. Certainly that's what the school is hoping, and that's very possible, but we just don't know.
Last question for you, Bruce, and thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
Last time we talked, which I think was right before the season began, you said you believed Arizona would likely be eligible for the tournament this season simply because the IARP wasn't likely to make a decision by March. It doesn't sound like anything has really changed there, has it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think at this point, I mean, I don't know what the precedents are exactly, but I think at this point, even if they came out with one tomorrow, I mean, it would seem a little too late to say you're not playing this year. So I got to think if they do get another year, it would probably be 22, 23. But if anything, and, all the more reason, as you guys were saying, maybe this is the best to focus on the season. And if you're a U of A fan, get excited about the season because they're probably going to be okay. And they might be okay in the future too. But if there's going to be an issue, it probably would be next season.
Well, he knows the team better than just about anybody who doesn't play on it. So Bruce Pascoe, thank you as always for joining us here in Wildcat Country.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I want to read you a message from Josette, a small business owner in Scottsdale. Josette says, Backcourt Marketing created a social media strategy for all of my gyms. They post engaging content every day and have really brought up the analytics on all of my pages. We meet to go over marketing ideas every month, and I really appreciate their personalized approach. That, in a nutshell, is the kind of return on your investment that you can expect when you trust Backcourt Marketing to fulfill your company's social media needs. This is a company that helps businesses reach their target audience online and build a brand that will crush the competition. They're a dedicated, knowledgeable team of brand advocates, designers, and creative writers who will help take your business to the next level. Make sure to get your business noticed. Call 480-744-6173. That's 480-744-6173. Or email team, TEAM, at backcourtmarketing.com to get started. And remember, Backcourt Marketing is the marketing agency for those who love competition.
Thanks to our friend Bruce Pascoe for joining us here on Wildcat Country. Always good to get his thoughts and find out, where he thinks the Wildcats will end up come March or April. All right, Shane, we haven't talked any football on the show, and it's kind of rare that it actually is very rare that we have gone an entire 2/3 of a show without talking any football, but now's a pretty good time to do so. By the time this podcast is released, it's signing day, and we don't know what's going to happen. I think it's, from what I understand, it's going to be a good signing day. The Wildcats looking, top 40 class as it stands right now.
Based on all of Jedd Fisch's cactus gifts, it certainly looks like it's going to be a good class, right?
Yeah, it's going to be, it should be. And we'll recap it next week, go over just some thoughts on the future of the program and everything like that. But I want to go over something and just a theory that I have and want to get your take on. So Oregon hired this guy, Dan Lanning, who is the Georgia defensive coordinator. I had never heard of him. And that's rare because, I follow college football pretty closely. Hadn't heard of him. He gets hired at Oregon, which seems like kind of an odd hire. And now the Servite wide receiver, T-Mac, who's a top 40 player in the nation, with a commitment to Oregon. Certainly that's up in the air. The guy that he is, his future position coach, Brian McClendon, likely to follow Mario Cristobal to the University of Miami. So T-Mac's recruitment is up in the air, and there are rumors that, Arizona has a shot to flip him. But here's another theory, Shane. The big prevailing thought about quarterbacks. So you and I talk about that. We every week. This quarterback going to go here. Who the Wildcats going to pursue? My theory is that the Wildcats are waiting to see what T-Mac does before they go after another quarterback. Why is that? Because if you end up with T-Mac, that means Noah Fafita is going to play by 2023, right? That means you only need a 1-year guy to bridge the gap. If he doesn't come, then Noah's not necessarily guaranteed playing time. It's only Kean Burnett, on the offensive side of the ball. That's not necessarily as important as a 5-star T-Mac, and therefore you could look at a longer-term solution at quarterback. Do you agree with that?
It's not implausible, but I think you'd have to be crazy to not go after some other top quarterbacks, including possible transfers.
I think for sure it's got to be a transfer quarterback.
Yeah, I think it'd be crazy to not do that. I mean, you think you have to when you strike while the iron's hot. I think they absolutely have to do that. So I disagree with you. I don't think it's entirely implausible, but I don't think you can try to in part base a very key part of your upcoming roster on one guy. Yes, we've learned his name is Tetaroa McMillan. Adam Gorney told us that last week. And he did say that Arizona should be in play along with possibly Miami if he does decommit from Oregon. But I think you would be insane to say, oh, well, a guy like maybe Chubba Purdy, he's interested, but let's wait and see what, I don't think they can do that. I don't think that makes sense.
They're doing that, Shane. I don't think it makes
any sense. I think that's
well, so
it's not ridiculous, but it's close to ridiculous.
So the prevailing thought that I have read throughout the internet in Wildcat circles is that they're waiting until after signing day to determine where to go as far as the transfer quarterbacks. Now you see a guy like Keaton Slovis, who's a Scottsdale kid, had a great season at USC a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. He's transferring out. So obviously pro style guy makes a lot of sense, but he's also a guy that could be, 1 year, has a good year and then goes to the pros. I really think that it depends. If T-Mac comes here, that means Noah Fafita has got to play within 2 years. And that is why I believe that he is the key, that T-Mac's recruitment is the key to Arizona's next quarterback. Is it a long-term guy or is it a 1 year, bridge?
Maybe. I don't know. Well, here's the thing is, if you had mentioned this to me before we started, I might have put a little more thought into it. My initial reaction, though, maybe that's what you want, is that I don't see that. I just don't see it. I think you have to put together the best class you think you can, regardless of what one guy or two guys are going to do. That's just my take.
Yeah, and that's a fair take. We'll see how it plays out. Just remember this, and I'm sure we'll bring it up in future shows. It's just amazing to me, though, that Jedd Fisch, coming off a season at 1-11, where they lost to a FCS team that was not very good in NAU. Their only win was against a COVID depleted Cal team. And now he's going to likely get a top 40 class or pretty darn close to it.
As of this recording, they are number 37 overall in Rivals team rankings for 2022. The number 3 class behind Stanford and Colorado. Now, obviously, USC and Oregon are likely going to pass them and all that.
Right.
But even at ranking in the top half of the Pac-12 will be their best performance in years, and a hell of a job for this coaching staff after the cupboard was bare and after winning just one game to a COVID-depleted Cal team in Jedd Fisch's first season.
But how is Jedd selling the program, though, Shane? Like, I mean, think about it. If you were in his position, how do you sell this? Is it, hey, we can play you right away?
I'm sure it's part of it. Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. But, I also think, Eric, more so than winning football games, most high school kids want to improve throughout their time in college so they can get to the NFL and make a lot of money. And Jedd Fisch and his staff have been able to sell them on that dream. Come to Arizona and you'll be better prepared to play at the next level. And they'll be able to take guys who are 3-star, high-end 3-star, low-end 4-star guys and say, look, if you stay on the path you're on, you might make it to the NFL. You come to Arizona, we'll definitely get you ready. If you do your part, if you do your part in the weight room and in practice and everything, you're a good teammate, we can help do the rest for you and get you to that next level. I think that's what this staff has been able to sell them on. I think it gets a little tougher without Don Brown now on the defensive side, but I do think that they'll be fine on the defensive side. There's the prospect, obviously, of starting as a true freshman, and it has to be appealing. But if that were the case, how many bad schools would get 3 and 4 star guys? So there's a lot more that goes into it than that. And I think that the prospect of come play here, and that's what Jay Johnson did with the baseball team, called an MLB training ground. Sean Miller called it the players program. You come play for Arizona and you have a better chance to play at the next level. And that's what the staff is selling them on. And they've done a heck of a job so far, obviously.
Yeah. And I'm really curious, just kind of separately, to see how the men's basketball team eventually recruits. We look at the women's team, who we haven't gotten a chance to talk about. Now, they haven't really played, any strong opponents of late.
They would need to do. They beat New Mexico. They're staying undefeated while they had a big game against Texas coming up soon.
But Adia lands another 5-star point guard.
Yeah.
And you look at the recruiting and you're like, damn, what she's doing is just unreal. And it makes sense. I mean, they're now in conversation for a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, which would just be mind blowing without Ari McDonald. And then, to be able to do that. But when you look at the men's team, there's not really much. I think there's one guy committed for 2022. I think it's Dylan Anderson.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll be curious to see what Tommy Lloyd does. You're going to lose Matherin. I'm sure he'll probably go the transfer route, but I would assume just about everybody else might come back. So, just thinking about that. But when it comes to football, very, very impressive for Jedd Fisch to be able to sell the future of a program that has no future, that has no past.
Yeah. Well, a limited one. Yeah. In the immediate past. Absolutely. And I think also it's impressive that they have lost a handful of some of their top commits, not all of them, but some of them. And they're still able to stay in that top 40. They're able to replenish that group of players. So that to me is just as impressive as anything. Schools like Arizona are going to lose some of those guys. They're going to keep taking visits. And by the way, someone still needs to explain to me why guys commit to a school and then go take other visits. If you want to go take other visits, fine. I don't care. But why? What upside is there to making a commitment when you're still going to go visit other schools? I don't understand.
I agree with you. But you could say the same in life about, you say somebody's your girlfriend and then you go out and you date the field.
Well, that's kind of what I'm talking. But the difference is if you're engaged to someone and then you go,
that's wrong. That's morally wrong.
So I'm not even saying it's morally wrong for these kids. I'm just wonder why you do it.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's all. So it's just, I guess I'm more just frustrated as a fan about that. And I understand decommitments happen. And when they happen in our favor, I absolutely love it. So I understand that, but if there's an upside to it, maybe there is. Someone please explain it to me, because I just don't get it.
Well, I'm going to assume that the early signing day is going to be pushed back at least 3 to 4 weeks from December of 2022 to January of 2023. So that'll certainly help. And let's, going forward with all these players going all over the place, like T-Mac, that could favor Arizona in this case, and probably a few other ones that we'll find out on Wednesday. It should be a very exciting day. And one thing that we will recap big time on Wildcat Country next week, probably in our first segment, if I'm already planning the show. Want to thank Bruce Pascoe for joining us. Want to thank our sponsor, Backcourt Marketing. They're awesome. Check out their tweets. For big basketball games, we'll do some stuff with them during the Tennessee game. Check them out on Twitter at BackcourtMKTG and online at backcourtmarketing.com. And our friends at All AZ Sports for help in producing the podcast. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. As always, bear down.